Hi class. I wanted to give you an intro video to chapter 2, which is on descriptive statistics. And that's kind of what this class is about. It's about describing the data. I have a set of data and I want to describe it. And how am I going to do that? How am I going to understand what the data is that I have in front of me? Okay, so just for an example here, I have a set of NFL Super Bowl scores. These are the scores that they've recorded that the Super Bowl teams have achieved. And in Excel, you can do this, and it says there are 51 scores, and so that's the data. And so if somebody gave you that and said describe it, what would you say? Well, just looking at that mess, you could say there's 2 digits maybe. I mean, for me, it's, looking at data, it kind of makes my eyes cross. And this is only 51 data points. A lot of data points have millions and millions of pieces of data. So what can we do to describe that? All right, so we might want to say, well, what's the middle of the data? Where's the middle of this data set, Is it like it's not in the middle, like visually, but we want to say, like, where's a typical data point? What's a typical score that if I was going to make a bet on these teams that the next Super Bowl, one of the teams would, get this score. And so you might say, well, I'm going to calculate the average, right? So let's see, I think in Excel it's just called average. So let's calculate the average. $30.2. All right, so you might say, okay, on average, a team scores 30 points. So that might be a good bet, right? Now, that's a calculation on a data set. This is the population data set. We have all the data. But the calculation, this is a statistic. This is, in fact, a parameter. Well, I don't know what years these are, but you remember the difference between that. But this is what we're doing in this class. We're making a calculation on a data set to give us an idea of how to understand that data. And so the first thing that we might say is on the average, the middle, a typical point is 30 points. Or we could do what? Like the min, right? I think that's a min. And I'm using this column of data. It's the same data, but in Excel to kind of calculate this, you have to have a column. So there's the minimum score is 14. So, and like I said, I don't know how up to date this is, but apparently your team is going to at least score 2 touchdowns. All right, and you can do the same with a max. And that's not, these min and max are not really calculations, right? But that's why I said technically a statistic is a function. You have an input of data and it goes through a function and it comes out. And so the max and min are functions. A statistic is a function of sample data, okay? So anyway, so we can do some things like this to tell us a little bit more about the data. Like if I want to make a bet, it's not likely that a team's going to get more than 55 points, right? That's the max since the beginning of the Super Bowl, okay? So you understand what we're doing. We're trying to describe a set of data, and that's descriptive statistics, okay? The other thing in the first part of this chapter, it talks about graphing. So these certainly tell us something about this data, but a histogram, we'll talk about histogram here in a minute, would tell us a lot more. All right, and I have a histogram. This is the same data over here. There's some other videos out there in the course about what a histogram is, but basically it's making counts. All right, it makes these divisions. In this case, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 divisions. And this is not the same data set, by the way, but it's counting in this division of data. Sometimes in Excel it's called a bin, and in our course it's called a class. All right, and that's just, it has boundaries, right, from 0 to 5.8. There's 7 data points. These are counts. A histogram counts numeric data, right? And it separates them into classes. Okay, so for this data set here, 7 of them are down on this end and 9 of them are between 23 and 29. All right, but look at that graph. That shows me how the data is distributed, which is a lot better than just one data point, right? This is showing me, we've got most of them in the middle, and then it kind of goes down on the ends of the middle, and then on the edges, it goes back up. And I have a little program written. I think if I change one of these, changes the whole thing. Okay, so this is a new data set, and it's given me a new distribution. A new distribution. That word is so important in statistics, a distribution. It means I want to know about the data that I'm working with. I want to know what the values are, like the values are from 0 to 6 to 30, you know, and this is not exact in a histogram because it doesn't tell you the exact values of the data. But I want to know what are the values and how often do they occur? What are the values and how often they occur? That's a distribution of data. And that's a very important concept in statistics. A histogram is this type of a chart that shows you one way to look at the distribution of the data. In this one, you know, the middle of the data is more frequent than these ends, okay? So let's just do one more here. If I change, I don't know, let's change this to 45. Let's see what happens here. All right, so this distribution of this data, most of them are on the low end from 0 to 9. If I counted this, there would be 14 of them. Like here's 1, there's 2, 0 to 9, there's another one, 3, 4. If I counted them all up, that determines the height of this class, okay? And that's a histogram. It shows me the distribution. And the first part of the 2.1 is on histograms and how you create them, and they're very valuable. Just remember, they're counts of numeric data, right? And you can choose, one last thing I want to show you, you can choose how many of these bins or classes you have, okay? It depends on how wide these are, all right? And just let me show you that here. For example, I think this is the NFL data. This is the NFL data, right? And it's showing me that in the middle, between 30 and 38, there's 17 times that happened. Once again, it's a count. I'm counting all these things, and this determines the height of that bar. All right? So this one has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 classes, and it gives me a good picture of what's going on with the data. That's what I want to know. Now, it does depend on how many classes you pick or how wide these classes are, right? So look at this one has 20 classes, and this number 20 is related to how wide the class is. What's the class width? If I make it shorter, I can get a lot more in here, but it's not telling me a very accurate picture of what the data is really looking like. You know, you can, so the researcher has to determine what kind of picture they want to create. If I pick 2 classes, this should be 2, it says 20, let me fix that. This is 2 classes, okay, and that's telling me, like, I'm going to divide the data in half. There's 37 of them that are between 14 and 34.5, and 14 of them on this side. But again, that's not telling me as much as perhaps this one. So you have to be careful when you're wanting to present your results. Like, what is the number of classes that is most meaningful? You know, and maybe the divisions will be natural. Like, you'll have, maybe you have ages. You're measuring ages of something, and so you go 0 to 10, and then you got the teens and the 20s. That's a typical way to divide data, and that's what you would make your class with, right? 0 to 10, right? So that's what 2.1 is about. The whole this whole chapter, module 2, is on descriptive statistics. We're trying to describe the data that we have. One of the best ways to do that is graphing. There's many different types of graph, and they all have their advantages. So look at the videos. I have some other videos out there And but I wanted to give you an intro to what we're doing in this part of the course.